A long time ago, in a distant city, there lived a young man who was painfully shy. His shyness was so extreme that whenever someone unfamiliar stood in front of him, he couldn't even utter a single word. Even with people he recognized, he felt awkward, struggling to hold a proper conversation. His silence wasn't by choice, it was something that controlled him, something he couldn't escape. This problem deeply troubled him. He longed to move forward in life, to build relationships, to find success. But no matter how much he tried, his extreme shyness always held him back. As the years passed, his fear of speaking only grew stronger. Instead of fading away, it became an inseparable part of him. He became increasingly frustrated, filled with anxiety and disappointment. He knew he needed to change, but he had no idea how. How to overcome this problem. Buddhist story. His family watched him with growing concern. They often wondered, what will happen to him? Will he ever be able to succeed in life? Whenever he ventured out in search of work, people would take advantage of his quiet nature. They saw his silence as weakness. They mocked him, manipulated him, and troubled him, knowing that he wouldn't say much in return. His lack of confidence made him an easy target. People insulted him and walked away, leaving him helpless, unable to defend himself, unable to respond. These experiences drained him. Slowly, he lost interest in everything. His mind was never at peace, always restless, filled with thoughts he couldn't express. He wanted to speak up, to make himself heard, but something inside him refused to let him. He felt trapped, his own fears suffocating him, locking him in silence. He never shared his feelings with anyone. As a child, people admired his quietness, calling him well-behaved and soft-spoken. But now, as an adult, that very quality had become a burden. What was once seen as a virtue was now a curse, preventing him from living a normal life. In the real world, confidence was key, and he had none. Day by day, he struggled to survive. He recognized his own problem. He knew he needed to change, and yet every time he tried, fear took over. He wanted to speak freely, to express his thoughts without hesitation, but his mind refused to cooperate. Whenever someone stood in front of him, his tongue froze. It felt like an invisible force was stopping him from talking. Even in the comfort of his own home, he found it difficult to speak openly with his parents. The words were there, inside him, but they never made it out. He had only a handful of friends, people he could talk to without fear, but in front of others, his voice vanished. The moment he tried to say something, people laughed. They mocked him, saying, "Oh, so now you finally learned to speak?" Their words cut deep, reinforcing his belief that he was incapable of expressing himself. Each day, his struggle grew heavier. Each moment, his confidence shrank a little more. And now, even his own father had begun to worry. Would he ever find a way to break free? Would he ever learn to speak without fear? The answer, unknown to him, was just around the corner. However, every time someone stood in front of him, his tongue froze. It was as if an invisible force gripped him, rendering him incapable of speaking. Even with his own parents, he could not express himself openly. He had only a handful of friends, people with whom he felt somewhat comfortable. But the moment he tried speaking in front of others, the reaction was always the same. Laughter, mockery, ridicule. People taunted him, saying, "Oh, so now you finally learned to speak?" Their words cut deep, like sharp knives slicing through his fragile confidence. Each time, the pain grew stronger. His self-doubt deepened, and his fear of speaking became even worse. Every day, his struggle intensified. His frustration grew, his silence became heavier, and now even his father had begun to worry. A life-changing lesson. Buddhist story. His parents were deeply concerned. They watched helplessly as their son drifted further into isolation, trapped by his own fear. More than anything, they wished for him to break free, to find his voice, to express himself, to stand confidently before the world. But nothing changed. One day, his father, overwhelmed with frustration, lost his temper. He could no longer bear to see his son suffer in silence. "Why are you like this?" he scolded. "Why can't you speak up? Why do you always stay quiet?" His voice was harsh, his words sharp. He did not mean to hurt his son, but in that moment, his patience had reached its limit. The young man stood there, frozen. His father's anger crashed over him like a tidal wave. He felt suffocated, trapped in a storm of emotions he couldn't express. Then, without a word, he turned and ran. He ran through the streets, past familiar faces, past places he once knew. He ran without looking back. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't share. Evening fell, yet he did not return home. His mother and father grew anxious. Their hearts were filled with fear. Where had he gone? Would he ever come back? But the young man kept running farther and farther until he reached the top of a mountain. There, standing at the edge of a steep cliff, he looked down at the deep valley below. The world stretched endlessly before him, yet he felt small, insignificant. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered to the heavens, "Oh Lord, why did you create me like this? Why do people mock me? Why do they laugh at me? Every time I try to speak, they humiliate me. They say whatever they want, and I cannot even respond." His voice broke as he continued, "What is the purpose of such a life? What will I ever gain from living like this? I can't endure it anymore. I am coming to you, my Lord." Saying this, he stepped closer to the edge, preparing to jump. The wind howled around him, carrying the weight of his despair. His heart pounded, his breath quickened. He was moments away from letting go. But just as he was about to take the leap, a voice called out from behind, "Son, giving up your life is easy, but once lost, you can never get it back." The words struck his ears like thunder. His body stiffened. His heart skipped a beat. Slowly, he turned around. To his astonishment, a Buddhist monk stood behind him. His presence was calm yet powerful. For a moment, the young man felt an unfamiliar fear creeping over him. Instinctively, he took a step back from the edge. His mind raced, but his voice failed him. He stood there in silence, his lifelong shyness keeping him from speaking. The monk, sensing his hesitation, spoke again, his voice gentle yet firm. "Son, what is troubling you? Why are you here? And why would you throw away such a precious life? This life is a rare gift, only a few are blessed with it. You must not let it slip away so easily." His life feels meaningless. Mere Buddhist story. Hearing these words, the young man lowered his gaze, his emotions still overwhelming him. He struggled to find the right words. Then, shaking his head, he muttered, No, it's nothing. I was just standing here, looking at the view." The Buddhist monk smiled knowingly, his eyes filled with understanding. "Son," he said, "I know exactly why you are here. You cannot hide the truth from me, but I want you to say it. Only then will I be able to help you. If you truly seek guidance, you must take the first step. You must tell me what is troubling you. Otherwise, I won't be able to do anything for you." The young man hesitated. A war waged within him. Part of him wanted to speak, but the fear of being judged held him back. After a brief pause, he shook his head and said, No, I am fine. I am telling the truth." The monk let out a soft sigh, but did not show disappointment. Instead, he gently nodded and said, "All right, my son. If you do not wish for my help, that is completely fine. I will trust your words, but in return, I ask you to trust me. When I say that I am here only to help you, if you wish, you can share your problem with me, and I will certainly help you find a solution." Still hesitant, the young man lowered his gaze. He felt a deep inner turmoil, a battle between wanting to open up and fearing judgment. After a long pause, he finally shook his head and muttered, No, I am fine. Please just go." The Buddhist monk observed him carefully, then slowly nodded. "All right, my son. If you truly want me to leave, I will go. But before I do, remember this: once I leave, I will no longer be able to help you. And it is possible that no one else will come forward to help you either." Saying this, the monk turned around and began walking away. His footsteps were slow, steady, and unwavering. The young man stood still, watching in silence as the monk moved farther and farther away. A strange feeling stirred within him, something between regret and fear. He watched as the monk's figure grew smaller, blending into the distance. And then, just as the monk was about to disappear beyond the horizon, the young man suddenly shouted, his voice desperate and pleading, "Gurudev, my problem is very big. Can you really solve it?" Overcoming fear and shyness. Buddhist story. Hearing his cry, the Buddhist monk stopped in his tracks. Slowly, he turned around and looked at the young man with deep compassion in his eyes. His gaze was neither judgmental nor impatient. It was filled with an understanding that made the young man feel safe for the first time in a long while. The monk took a step forward and said, "Son, there is no problem in this world without a solution. If you tell me what is troubling you, I will certainly help you find a way to overcome it." Encouraged by these words, the young man swallowed his fear and finally gathered the courage to speak. "Gurudev," he began hesitantly, "I have a very big problem. I am extremely shy, so shy that I cannot talk to anyone. I struggle to express my own thoughts. Whenever I try to speak, people laugh at me. They mock me. And when someone insults me or speaks harshly to me, I cannot respond." His voice quivered as he continued. "I want to be smart like other people. I want to be able to speak with confidence. I want to express myself freely, to walk step by step with this world and move forward without fear. But I don't know how. I feel trapped in my own silence. Gurudev, is there any solution to this?" The Buddhist monk listened intently, absorbing every word the young man spoke. After a moment of reflection, he gently replied, "Son, excessive shyness means there is a fear within you, one that you have not yet recognized. And because you cannot identify it, you are unable to overcome it. Shyness and fear are not the same. Being shy is one thing, but being afraid is another. When fear takes root in our hearts, it follows us everywhere. It prevents us from speaking freely, from acting confidently, from living fully. But true shyness is different. It may keep you quiet for a while, but it does not paralyze you with fear." The monk then asked, "Tell me, son, who do you feel most shy around?" The young man fell silent for a moment, thinking deeply. Finally, he took a deep breath and answered, "Gurudev, I feel most shy when I am with..." He hesitated again before finishing his sentence. "I feel extremely shy when talking to my father. I can never speak freely in front of him." The Buddhist monk smiled knowingly. "All right," he said, "then tell me when you try to talk to your father, what thoughts come to your mind?" The young man sighed, his voice heavy with emotion. "Gurudev, whenever I try to talk to my father, I feel like he is about to scold me. I fear that he will get angry, that he will be disappointed in me. Somewhere deep inside, I also feel that I might say something wrong. Sometimes I even question whether my father truly loves me." He paused for a long moment, then looked up at the monk. "But Gurudev, you said that being shy and being afraid are two different things. Is there a way for me to get rid of my fear completely? Can you tell me a solution that will help me overcome this anxiety? I want to live fearlessly, just like others do." The monk looked at him thoughtfully, then finally said, "Go home and tell your father that you want to do some work and need money for it. If you succeed in asking him for money, I will give you the solution to your problem." The young man's heart began pounding violently. His face turned pale with fear. He anxiously stammered, "Gurudev, please don't give me this task. I can never say such things to my father. I struggle to speak in front of him. How will I ever ask him for money?" The Buddhist monk's gaze remained calm and steady. "Son," he said, "if you truly wish to overcome your fear, you must face it. If you refuse to take even this small step, how do you expect to walk the path of confidence?" The young man lowered his head. His breathing was unsteady. He knew the monk was right, yet the mere thought of speaking to his father filled him with dread. "But, Gurudev," he began, searching for another way out. The monk raised his hand gently. "No excuses, my son. Either you face your fear, or you remain trapped in it forever. The choice is yours." The young man clenched his fists. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat. The task seemed impossible. Yet deep inside, a small voice whispered, "What if I try?" Taking a deep breath, he looked up at the monk and with great hesitation said, "All right, I will try." With those words, his journey toward overcoming fear had begun. The monk calmly replied, "Then, my son, there is no solution to your problem. If you cannot complete this simple task, you will never overcome your fear, and you will never be able to live your life freely." Hearing this, the young man panicked. His heart raced and his breath grew unsteady. He quickly pleaded, "Gurudev, please don't say that. I beg you, give me another task, something that will help me overcome my fear completely." The monk shook his head firmly. "Son, If you truly wish to free yourself from fear, you must complete the task I have given you. There is no other way." The young man stood there lost in thought. His mind swirled with doubts and hesitation, but deep inside he knew that if he refused, he would remain trapped in his fear forever. After what felt like an eternity, he took a deep breath and gathered his courage. "All right, Gurudev," he said at last. "If you insist that I must do this, then I will try my best." Saying this, he turned and made his way home. The first step towards change. Buddhist story. As soon as he stepped inside, his parents saw him and their faces lit up with joy. "Son, where have you been?" his mother asked with relief in her voice. His father, though not as expressive, watched him closely. The young man felt a lump rise in his throat. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, but he had made a promise he had to go through with it. Taking a deep breath, he slowly walked up to his father. "Father," he said nervously, "I have something to say." His father noticed the hesitation in his voice and furrowed his brow. "Speak, what is it?" he asked. Summoning all his strength, the young man finally said, "Father, I want to do some work, and for that, I need some money. Can you give me some?" His father looked at him carefully, observing him in silence. The room felt unbearably still. The young man swallowed hard, fearing his father's reaction. Then after a long pause, his father's face softened. A wide smile spread across his lips. The path to overcoming fear. Buddhist story. Seeing his son finally speak up, the father felt immense joy. Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and placed some money into the young man's hands. "Son," he said warmly, "this money should be enough. Do you need more?" The young man, still overwhelmed by what had just happened, quickly shook his head. No, father. This is enough. I can manage with this much." Holding the money tightly in his hands, he turned and rushed back to the Buddhist monk. His heart raced, not from fear this time, but from excitement. He had done it. He had faced his father and asked for money without running away. When he reached the monk, he held out the money eagerly and said, "Gurudev, just as you asked, I have brought the money. I asked my father for it, and he gave it to me. Now please tell me the solution to my problem." The monk smiled knowingly. "Why are you in such a hurry, son?" he asked. "Before I give you the solution, you must complete one more task for me." The young man's face fell. "Another task?" he asked, feeling disheartened. "Gurudev, I have already done what you asked. Now you are giving me another task?" The monk nodded. "Yes, son. You must complete one more task. Only then will I tell you the solution to your problem." The young man stood there deep in thought. He let out a sigh, then finally said, "All right, what do I have to do now?" The monk looked at him calmly and said, "Go back to your father and return the money. Tell him, 'Father, I do not want this money right now, but when the time comes, I will ask you for it again and use it for my work.'" Hearing this, the young man froze. His hands trembled, and a cold fear crept up his spine. "Gurudev, please give me some other task," he pleaded. "I will surely do it. But if I go back and return the money, what will my father think of me? He might be angry or feel insulted. I will feel embarrassed in front of him." The Buddhist monk smiled and shook his head. "Son," he said, "you must complete the task I have given you. If you do not, I will never tell you the solution to your problem." The young man clenched his fists. His mind was in turmoil. He had barely managed to complete the first task, and now he had to do something even more difficult. He struggled with his thoughts for a long time, but in the end, he knew there was no other way. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. "All right, Gurudev, I will return the money to my father and come back to you." Facing his fear. Again, Buddhist story. With heavy steps, he walked back home. This time, he felt an entirely different kind of fear, one that made his heart pound louder than before. Upon reaching home, he found his father sitting in the same place. Mustering all his courage, he stepped forward and said, "Father, I do not want this money right now. Please take it back. When the time comes, I will ask for it again and use it for my work." His father looked up at him, his face unreadable. He stared at his son for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, a gentle smile appeared on his face. "Son," he said, "I understand. Before starting any work, we must first..." The young man stood frozen, listening intently to his father's words. His heart, which had been filled with fear moments ago, now felt surprisingly light. For the first time, he realized something powerful. His father wasn't angry, nor was he disappointed. Instead, there was warmth in his voice, a kindness he had never noticed before. At that moment, something changed within him. The task the monk had given him wasn't just about money, it was about facing his fear, about stepping beyond his own hesitation and breaking free from the shackles that had bound him for so long. And in that instant, he knew. He was ready for whatever came next. His father smiled warmly and said, "Son, before starting any work, one must first gather the right information. It is important to understand when, how, and for how long something should be done. No work should be started blindly. We must analyze whether we are capable of completing it or not. Only when we have full knowledge of a task should we invest money in it. I am very happy that you have made the right decision. When you are certain that the work you want to do is truly beneficial for you, you can come to me and I will give you the money again." Hearing his father's wise words, the young man felt immense joy in his heart. He had never expected that his father would smile and explain things to him with such patience and kindness. As he stood there still processing his father's words, his father suddenly stepped forward and embraced him tightly, holding him with love. At that moment, the young man felt something he had never felt before, a deep sense of warmth and confidence. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. His self-esteem grew, and he felt stronger than ever before. After this life-changing experience, he hurried back to the Buddhist monk. As soon as he reached him, he said eagerly, "Gurudev, I have done exactly as you asked. I returned the money to my father. Now please, I beg you, tell me the solution to my problem." The Buddhist monk smiled and replied, "Why are you in such a hurry, son? You still have one last task to complete before I reveal the solution to you." The young man grew frustrated. "Gurudev, why do you keep making me do these tasks? Do you even have a solution to my problem? Or are you just fooling me, just like others do? Are you also playing with me, the way people have always made fun of me?" He continued, "First, you told me to ask my father for money. I did that. Then you told me to return the money. I did that too. And now you are asking me to do yet another task. I can't do this anymore." The Buddhist monk looked at him with a gentle smile and said, "Son, this is the last task, and it is very simple. I promise you that once you complete it, I will give you the solution to your problem." The young man thought for a moment. After deep contemplation, he finally sighed and said, "All right, but this will be the last task. What do you want me to do?" The monk then took out a small idol and placed it in the young man's hands. The idol looked very ordinary, made of simple clay with no special features. The monk then instructed, "Son, take this idol to the market and sell it. You must bring back 100 gold coins in exchange for it. Only when you succeed in doing this will I tell you the solution to your problem." The young man looked at the idol carefully, examining it from all angles. He then turned to the monk and said in disbelief, "Gurudev, this idol looks so plain, almost like it is made of simple clay. Who in the world would give me 100 gold coins for something like this?" The final test of confidence, Buddhist story. The young man, still in disbelief, looked at the Buddhist monk and said, "Who would ever give me 100 gold coins for this? Have you lost your mind, Gurudev? If I managed to get even 1 or 2 gold coins for it, that would be a miracle. But 100 gold coins? That's impossible." The monk smiled calmly and replied, "Son, if you complete the task I have given you, only then will you receive the solution to your problem. Otherwise, you are free to return home, to your old life, back to the same world where people mock you, intimidate you, and ridicule you." He continued, "I am giving you a chance to break free from your fears. Each task I have given you has been helping you gradually overcome your hesitation and self-doubt. Complete this task, and everything will become clear to you." Hearing this, the young man thought to himself, "No matter what, I need the solution to my problem. I must complete this task." Determined, he picked up the idol and set off towards the marketplace. Upon reaching the market, he stood quietly in one place, holding the idol in his hands, waiting for someone to approach him and ask about it. Minutes turned into hours, yet no one came. He looked around and noticed that all the other vendors were loudly calling out to attract customers. They were shouting, promoting their products, and confidently engaging with buyers. As expected, no one paid him any attention. Slowly, evening approached, and a new fear gripped him. What if the Buddhist monk left before he could sell the idol? Who would then give him the solution to his problem? This fear pushed him to try harder. Summoning all his strength, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Buy this idol for 100 gold coins!" His loud voice finally caught people's attention, and curious onlookers gathered around him. One person stepped forward and asked, "What is so special about this idol that you are asking for 100 gold coins?" The young man hesitated for a moment. He had not thought about what to say, so he quickly replied, "I don't know. I was just asked to sell it." Hearing this, one of the men laughed and said, "If you don't even know what makes it special, then why would anyone buy it?" Another man added, "Yes. If this idol is worth 100 gold coins, then surely it must have some unique qualities. You need to tell us what makes it valuable." Slowly, more and more people gathered around him, all asking the same question. Why is this idol worth 100 gold coins? The young man tried explaining in different ways, struggled to convince people, and made several attempts, but no one was willing to buy the idol at that price. Disheartened and frustrated, he felt lost and confused. He didn't know what to do next. Just then, his eyes fell upon something in the marketplace. The power of confidence, read Buddhist story. As he observed the other vendors in the market, he noticed something important. They were confidently describing the special features of their products. They weren't just standing there silently. They were actively engaging with customers, explaining why their goods were valuable. Watching them, the young man realized something. If I want to sell this idol, I must do the same. I need to tell people why it is special. Summoning all his courage, he took a deep breath and raised his voice. "This is the only idol of my guru that exists in this world, the one that solves all problems. Whoever owns this idol will never have any difficulties in their home. This idol will provide the solution to every challenge you face." His words echoed through the marketplace, drawing people's attention. Curious onlookers began to gather around him. One person stepped forward and asked, "Is it true? Will this idol really solve all problems?" With newfound confidence, the young man boldly replied, "Yes, it will solve all your problems. No matter how big or small, this idol will reveal the solution to you." The crowd grew larger. Whispers spread, and soon excitement filled the air. People started bidding for the idol. Some offered 200 gold coins, others 400, some 600, and one person was even willing to pay 1,000 gold coins. The price kept rising as more people became convinced of its power. For the first time in his life, the young man felt no fear. He spoke without hesitation, explaining why the idol was valuable. He no longer second-guessed himself. He was no longer afraid of what others thought. For the first time, he stood before a crowd, completely self-assured. As night fell, the demand for the idol did not decrease. People still wanted it at any cost. Then suddenly, the young man raised his voice and made an announcement. "Forgive me, everyone, but this is my guru's idol, and I cannot sell it." A hush fell over the crowd. They looked at him in shock. Saying this, he held the idol tightly and walked away, his steps strong and confident. He had entered the market filled with fear, but now he was leaving fearless. When he reached the Buddhist monk, he humbly bowed and said, "Gurudev, thank you. This idol has solved my problem. Now I finally understand what was wrong with me. Even though I did not sell it and bring back gold coins, I have found the solution to my biggest fear. Thank you so much." Hearing this, the Buddhist monk smiled and replied, "Son, I did not solve your problem. You solved it yourself. You were trapped by your own fears. You constantly wondered, what will people think of me? You were afraid that if you spoke, people would laugh at you. You believed that if you opened your mouth, you would say something wrong. You carried countless fears in your heart, but today you have broken free from them all.